Hello, everyone. My name is Fiona Marks, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to the Vedic Astrology Podcast. The Vedic Astrology Podcast has 5 topic areas. What is Vedic astrology? How does astrology work? Exploring the knowledge and techniques of Vedic astrology, interviews with Vedic astrologers, and case studies. And today it's topic 4, as the Vedic Astrology Podcast sits down with Laura Barat. Laura, I want you to thank you for joining us here on the Vedic Astrology Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
To get us started, can you tell us something about your background and how you got into astrology?
I was actually following a Kriya Yoga path. It's called SRF, or Self-Realization Fellowship. And that's basically Yogananda. And he wrote a book mentioning astrology, and his guru was an astrologer. And so I became really interested in astrology just from that. They wanted us to wear a bracelet of copper and gold and silver to placate the planets, or to help us. Some gems and some certain metals are supposed to be synchronized with the planetary energies. And I thought that was fascinating. So that got me started. I started looking into astrology, Vedic astrology. That's really where it led, or how it started. So
that's fascinating. I didn't come to Vedic astrology through a spiritual group, but when I was young, I got involved with an Indian spiritual group, but it wasn't Yogananda's. It was called the Brahma Kumaris, Raja Yoga.
Oh, okay.
And as a young person, I was very attracted to meditation and to the whole, that just seemed to be the knowledge and philosophy that I was drawn to. So it's interesting that connection, different groups and different paths, but they ended up leading to Vedic astrology.
Right.
So did you then go straight into Vedic astrology, or did you start with Western? How did you choose Vedic astrology?
I actually went to Vedic first, just because that was the community I was in. They were talking about Vedic astrology, and especially the remedies. I thought that was fascinating. You had actual physical remedies, like wearing gems or doing certain things that could help the planets, which they don't really have in Western. And so I started studying Vedic first. I thought I might as well just hop into that first. I really liked it because, as opposed to Western, because it is an unbroken chain of knowledge. So in India, astrology is everywhere. Okay. And it's highly regarded. And they never had persecution of astrologers or astrological knowledge. Whereas in the West, we did have a lot of astrological knowledge in Rome and Greece. There were, and throughout Europe. However, the Catholic Church persecuted people for that. Especially one of the big ones was Giordano Bruno, which was a Italian astrologer and occultist, and he was tortured and put to death because of that very thing, of delving into astrology. And so we lost a lot of knowledge during that time, when anything else besides Catholicism was pursued. Whereas in India, that was encouraged, it wasn't persecuted, and they have knowledge going all the way back to, the before Christian era, the BCE times. And so there's a plethora of techniques. There's so many different techniques that you can study. Just the vastness of this knowledge that they kept, which is what attracted me to it. And I'm not saying at all that there's anything wrong with Western astrology. There are a lot of great techniques with Western astrology. Western astrologers do make great predictions, and there's a lot to learn from it. And I learned Western astrology later, like a couple of years later. but I just really was drawn to the Vedic. And then another thing about Vedic is it's very much married to the Hindu religion. It has divinity behind it. The planets are given divine consciousness. That makes sense to me. In Rome and Greece, it was the same thing. You had Jupiter, you had the god Jupiter, which was Zeus, and you had planets, and these planetary energies had divinity and divine consciousness. Now, in the current Western astrology, that's not really the case. They don't worship the planets, or they don't placate the planets, but in Vedic, they do. So that also really drew me in. It's basically giving a mystical meaning to astrology, but because the planets create everything, according to Vedic astrology, it gives a mystical meaning to every aspect of life. And so yeah, that's why I chose Vedic over Western, even though I do Western,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And I love the way you've put it, Laura. I think that is what attracts many people to Vedic astrology, isn't it? The access to an unbroken lineage, and also the integrated mythology, health, mysticism, prediction, daily routine. Yes. And this is something we've been covering in the Vedic Astrology podcast, is putting Vedic astrology in that context, which as Westerners, we've been detached, from that integrated approach to knowledge. All of our knowledge is specialized in the West, and it's very refreshing to have oneself placed in an integrated theology that covers.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so then now you are a Vedic astrologer, what's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part is research. I love doing research. I don't know. It's just an investigative part, and seeing what techniques work, how they work, how accurate they are. I really love doing that. And I also love writing. I love writing about astrology. I love writing blog posts, courses, books, all of that. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That research that you were talking about, it makes me think about the 8th house and how many of us in astrology have something going on in the 8th house. And
oh, yes,
it attracts
absolutely.
us not just to astrology, but to research. And this is a time when it feels that the community is ready to do more research. Do you get that feeling that we're a little bit on the cusp of being more accurate or validated, or how would you describe that? We've got enough astrologers now to maybe as a community really bring this discipline back to a recognized discipline.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely believe that. And I see that happening all around me. Most of my astrologer colleagues also love doing research too. So, and I know that Ernst does quite a bit of research. So before he puts something out, and that's what I've been doing as well. So it really brings a bit of validity to it. If you can see something working 70 to 80% of the time on 500 charts, okay, this technique is pretty accurate, it's
That's
solid.
Right.
So yeah, and a lot of people are skeptical about astrology for that, oh, you're just making it up, oh, you can see this on everybody. Well, no, you can't. It's something that is going to go beyond skepticism, or it can pass the test of skepticism. So yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I do feel like, maybe everyone feels like this, every generation feels like that, but to me, it seems as if we're getting to some critical mass around that level of investigation. So I look forward to, I don't know, in 10 years, kind of having the Research Institute or, some foundation or something where we are really pumping out this peer-reviewed like you say, large sample
Yes.
tested research. All right. Okay, well, let's send that hope out there and see what comes from that. But does that lead into my next question 3, which is, what do you see is the role of astrology?
That's a really good question. For me, it's helping people not waste time.
Interesting.
Because, so time is really all we have, right? Time is ruled by Saturn.
Yep.
And a lot of people, first of all, a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And I would say the majority of people are that way. There are a lot of people who, or a minority of people, know what they want to do from a very young age. They have a lot of, they're very driven, right? Then you have people who just have no idea. That was me. Okay. And they also really don't know who they are. They're not in touch with themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. But just some people come into life like that, and they're designed in this lifetime that has to kind of do with the first house and the sign of Aries and Rahu and those kinds of things. But they have just no idea what their purpose is, what their talents are, what they should pursue. And they'll get into things where they're just spinning their wheels, where it's just not going anywhere. They're not seeing results. It's unfulfilling. That's one of the main things. I think astrology can help immensely in this area, by showing people what they're talented at, what they can, actually put energy into and get some kind of result from, or fulfilling result, I should say. And rather than, moving around to a bunch of different things, thinking that if they just try this new thing, that's going to give them some fulfillment and be inspiring to them. Astrology really can show the person their strengths and weaknesses, and where, certain avenues, especially in career, where, getting into things that are just not going to really work for them. And then also another thing about the role of astrology is it's going to show where our weaknesses are, where we can waste time, but it's also going to show how we can better those habits. So if we know a certain planet in our chart is afflicted, heavily afflicted, if we know that, automatically we know what we need to work on, what, takes a little more effort. That is such powerful knowledge, because a lot of people don't understand that about themselves. They keep trying something and they're saying, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? What am I doing wrong? And then you can look at the chart and you can say, oh, okay, your Mercury is heavily afflicted, or, whatever. You need to work on trying to develop a more effective communication. You need to experiment with things a little more, all the Mercury type of things. So that also enables people not to waste time just by developing better habits with those afflicted planets. So
absolutely. I agree. And I think it helps people not be discouraged that just because someone else has a great Mercury and you're observing them and things seem to go easy in that particular stream of life, and you yourself try and do those things, and no matter what you do, it's not as successful. It seems like a lot of effort. You don't know why should I keep trying? And astrology can help you not be discouraged by that and say, yep, you're right on track. That's
right.
that's exactly what the experience would be. Don't give up. That's just, you're on a steeper hill, or your bit of ground is rocky compared to the other person's.
Right. Exactly.
So
yeah,
it can stop a lot of that self-judgment or self-defeating.
Yes, absolutely. It really does.
Yeah, it's great. And as you were speaking, it also made me think about if we're comfortable with all the philosophy backing up Vedic astrology, that process of reincarnating, one is kind of lost in this new body with this new identity, and one is blind, working blind, a little bit trying to find one's way in the dark. And
right. It gives you a map. It definitely, like in the West, we're just kind of born and they tell you, oh, you can be anything you want to be, well, not really. If you have a map, okay, this is a good planet. This is my Aunt Makarica. I've got talents in these things. You can follow the map, a little bit, where you're just born willy-nilly and you have, no direction, leading you. And that's why astrology is really powerful in that area. It can give you a kind of a map, a navigate a map of your life.
Great. Thanks, Laura. All right, let's have a listen to question 4.
Okay.
If there was a continuum from soft astrology to hard astrology, that is from understanding yourself to predictions, or from the astrologer counseling the person to the astrologer giving blood test results of the facts of your chart, do you recognize that continuum? Where do you sit on that continuum? Tell me a little bit of your reaction to that question.
Okay. This is a great question. All right. So I kind of have a lot to say about this question because it's just a great question. All right. So most of my career, up until the last few years, really, I've been more of a predictive astrologer. However, now I'm more going into the healing part of it, the psychological and emotional part of astrology, because they're not really different.
Exactly.
What happens in your life, you basically get what you are. What you are inside is reflected in everything that happens on the outside. And everything that happens on the inside or on the outside in your life, everything that happens to you is basically an omen giving you clues about yourself. When people want to hear predictions, and that's just, I give predictions, I'm not one of those people that say, oh no, I'm not a predictive. I don't predict. I like giving predictions because it helps. It really gives faith in astrology. That's one reason. It's saying, okay, this works, this is correct. But what happens is when I make a prediction, sometimes they need to hear that prediction to believe in themselves or to believe that it can happen. If I give a prediction where they were hoping that something would happen and I see that it won't, it's because when I say that I don't see this happening, that also kind of changes them internally. It changes their consciousness, because nothing is going to happen. Like the life doesn't really shift in a completely new direction until something changes internally. So that is why I don't think the two are separate. They're actually connected. But okay, and then I'm gonna segue here into another kind of different avenue, going back to the ancient astrology, and even in India, and even in the Rome and Greece and the oracles, quote unquote. But okay, so in the ancient times, they gave predictions in riddles. They didn't flat out tell you, oh, you're going to get married on this date to this person, whatever it was, whatever the prediction was. They gave it in riddles. And the reason they did that is because what is happening outside of us, of course, is internal, but a lot of it is unconscious or subconscious. And it really takes a lot of getting in touch with yourself to understand what's happening in your subconscious. And you do that as you get older and you meditate and you study these types of things, astrology, especially, you can start to understand your subconscious. And they would give riddles in the ancient times. And the person's like, what, huh? But what it does is the riddle works on your subconscious. By trying to figure it out, you're actually changing your subconscious. And this is what is done in Buddhist, in Zen Buddhism, when they give a person what they call a koan. It's called KOAN.
Okay.
It's basically a riddle, and you think about this riddle and you churn it over and over in your mind, and it's not something you can figure out right away. You have to really contemplate it. And so when you do that, your consciousness starts to change, and then you can begin to understand what that prediction means, and how that prediction is changing you internally, is actually pushing your evolution. Because just giving predictions, spelling it all out, whenever I do that, I tell the person, okay, I just gave you a prediction and you've been thinking in your mind how it's going to play out. As I'm telling you these things, you're forming pictures in your mind of how all this is going to happen. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not going to happen the way you think it is. But it will happen, because that is giving a prediction is a very, I want to say, metaphysical thing, because the way that it happens, the way the prediction happens, is a psychological transformation. So that's how these two are connected. If I had my way, I would also give predictions and riddles. But, people don't want that. That's not modern, quote unquote. But that's what I would do.
Laura, I love that. You could be famous as the astrologer that people go to and don't understand a word of your answer.
I know. But eventually you come to understand, so it's
Definitely.
But then because people really want things to happen. They're looking forward to something. Am I going to be famous? Am I going to get this job? Am I going to get a promotion? It's like, yeah, but how you get there is more important than the actual outcome. So I would say, now I'm both. I really do like to talk to people about what's going on in their psychology and their emotional body, and then give predictions. I do think predictions can help people. I absolutely believe that. I basically am both now. I would say I'm 50-50, where before I was more predictive. Not completely, but mostly. So
I love all of your answer to this question, Laura. This is where now we could spend the whole podcast talking about this, because in a way, the chart is a perfect riddle, isn't it? You've already laid out for us that it's a map.
Yeah.
And it is, but it's written in code, and
Right.
a lot of that code is conflicting code. It's,
Mm-hmm.
full steam ahead and go backwards at the same time. There's a lot of things that cancel each other out, so that for a person who's reading their chart for the first time, or if it's not something that they generally do, there's just too much data in there. It's just, there's too many yeses and nos and forwards and backwards that it's very hard to discern the meaning of the map. So I just think it's wonderful. I can imagine the gods up there laughing as we're saying that, I wish I could give my predictions in code, and they're like, hey, that's what I did. I laid these planets out for you. What are you trying to do? And also I think that's in some ways what an astrologer is doing, isn't it? That they're pre-digesting some of that riddle that is the birth chart. That's what we do in between the time that you book your session and pay your money, and in between that time your astrologer is digesting your chart in some way, trying to sense all of those omens, as you're putting them, all of those signs that are in there, and weighing them up. And sometimes I feel like it's like you've got the ingredients of a
Yeah.
meal, and
Mm-hmm.
as an
Mm-hmm.
astrologer you're trying to taste all the ingredients at the same time in your mouth, and some of them really don't go together, it's,
Right.
and that's why the person themselves with their own life experience in some ways can't digest the chart, because the flavors are so conflicting. But with as an astrologer, you're hopefully getting lots of practice at these different flavors, and you're able to hold them more and not spit them out, and just kind of stay with that.
Yes.
And so
Yes, that's such a wonderful analogy, really, about the recipe and tasting. That's so true, because the one of the planets of astrology or prediction, the planet of prediction is Venus. Believe it or not, it's a Gemini technique. Venus is the poet, and Venus is the planet that helps us find meaning where there is none. And Venus, it rules taste. It rules the sense of taste, and it rules the essence, the rasa, the essence of things. Like when we taste things, we get its essence. So it's so interesting that you brought up that analogy, because it's so true. It's like you're tasting the essence of the person when you're looking at their chart.
That's right. That's right. And every chart is a meal. It's a banquet, and
it is.
Yeah. So I'm always very honored when someone shares their chart with me. It's the opportunity to sit down in their kitchen with the ingredients that they have in the order that they can cut them up and put them together, and you do your best to taste that, and then in some way you've digested it as the astrologer, then you try and help the person digest their own chart. So
Yeah.
That's an amazing job.
Yeah, it is.
So then, following up from that, how much do you use intuition in your work?
I can't really separate my intuition from my logical mind. I don't think I can. When I look at a chart, things just start popping up, immediately, just start flashing, boom, 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 boom. And I let that come. And those are usually those first things that start coming, I use. But what I'm doing is, because I know techniques, I know, certain techniques, and I know them by heart. I've memorized them. So when I've memorized the technique, it's kind of like a map, or again, a map, a formula, I guess in math, you could say.
A template.
Right. And it just points me in certain directions. And I really, I've been asked this before, and it's just, I can't separate the technique from the intuition, or just reading a chart, following steps, I guess you could say, following the steps of a technique. It's all melded together. I think in the beginning, when I was first learning techniques, I was saying, okay, follow the steps, and I come out with this result. Because I did not have the technique memorized, it took me longer to come to a conclusion when my intuition already told me the answer. I can't really separate the two anymore.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It makes me think of athletes who practice, and maybe takes me back to Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, and, painting the wall up and painting the wall down. And as an athlete, initially you repeat strokes, you're not playing tennis, or you're not playing football. You're just doing the right. Repeated practice. And then at some point, those skills become, the brain has internalized those.
Yes.
And then the person is playing tennis or football, and it's intuitive. They know which part of the field to go to next. And if you had to stop them and say, why did you go this way or that way? They might be able to say, let me think, and I saw a something or whatever. But it's not a conscious process. They just go to the other side of the court to receive the ball before the other player has even sent it over the net or whatever. So
that's so true. Yeah, that's exactly the same thing. That's what it's like. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. And what about, have you consulted an astrologer yourself? And what was the most useful information you've gained from an astrologer, if you have had an astrology session?
Okay, I've only had, believe it or not, one astrology reading. And I mean, I've had people look at my chart and tell me things, but I've never really paid them to do that, and well, I haven't. And it's just, friends and colleagues. I've only had an actual astrology session. It was a Western astrologer. It was the first astrologer I went to, and she looked at my chart and she said, "Oh, you're very insecure." and I said, "Okay, well, why do you see that?" And she said, "Oh, you're a Pisces rising, and your sun is in Pisces, so you're a double Pisces or whatever." And the thing was, she was right in a sense, but it wasn't because of what she said. After I studied astrology more, I understood why. It wasn't that I was insecure. It was that I had low self-worth. I had a lot of self-esteem, but I had low self-worth. There's a difference between the two. And which has to do with the second house and Venus and stuff like that. But I just always remembered that, she started the whole session with that pronouncement. I was taken aback a little bit, I was like, nobody ever really came out and blurted that out like that. But it was at a time in my life when I was, really lost. So I kind of related to it, but I thought it was a little unnecessarily negative for her to say that right at the beginning. It didn't turn me off of astrology at all. In fact, it made me dive more into it, obviously, but it was just, I just never really felt the need to get another reading because I was going to figure out my chart on my own. So yeah, that's how that happened.
And I love that story, Laura, because it plays so beautifully into what we were talking about omens and riddles, that in some ways you were always meant to get into astrology. And what does the oracle do or whatever? It sends you an astrologer who says something that breaks the rapport and gives you a bit of information that you have to go unpack, because you're like, well, it's not to do with Pisces and it's not to do with the sun, and you haven't put your finger on it, and there it goes. It drives you to dive deeper and discover more and become an astrologer that wouldn't necessarily start your session with that opening statement.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you survived that experience of going to an astrologer, and we have you here today. And so then what about what's the most useful insight that you've gained from the philosophy of Vedic astrology or from being an astrologer?
Oh, okay. So this is a great one. Well, the philosophy I've got, the best insight I would say is dealing with disappointment, dealing with negative people, or, it's just really learning how to get through trying times, dealing with more of the, I want to say, inner demons, and also with, people who are very difficult people. Because I had a real problem with that when I was younger. I was very afraid of confrontation. I didn't like, aggressive, assertive people that would start attacking me, or I wouldn't even say attacking me, but just somebody who was really, kind of what you would call a difficult person. And I would always run away from those things. But as I got older, astrology really helped me to understand what these people mean in a person's life. And the negative karmas associated, with just having disagreements and clashing with people, or even having bad relationships. What that represents as as a challenge to the person. That's what I get from astrology. Really, that's the most useful insight, I would say.
there's so much, isn't there, to be gained from studying Vedic astrology, not necessarily to ever read a chart, but because it is such an integrated field, it gives one a whole philosophy of life and an extremely broad understanding of
Definitely.
why things happen and don't happen.
Very much so. And it's very comforting. It
Yes,
really is.
I agree. And I find that when people come for sessions, most often they find it really comforting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Which is
Absolutely.
which is the opposite of, you sit down and someone says, well, you're very insecure, or whatever this, first opening statement is going to be, where someone, you know, looks at your chart and makes some judgment and yells it out at you.
Yeah.
In contrast to that, I find most often that Vedic astrology it's really comforting to the client and very compassionate
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
client's
Yeah.
life.
hmm
It gives them compassion for themselves and what they've been through. And
It definitely does.
are there any signs, planets, houses, conjunctions, aspects, vargas that intrigue you most at the moment? Just tell me, what are your favorite, most fascinating things?
So right now I'm really fascinated by the sixth house. The sixth house and the sign of Aquarius. To me, the sign of Aquarius is a little difficult to understand. It was always kind of difficult for me to understand the sign of Aquarius. I don't know why, and the sixth house is a growing house, but it's also what a quote unquote dishtana, or evil house. Planets in the sixth house, especially benefic planets like the moon or Venus, Jupiter. Well, I won't really say Jupiter really, but the moon and Venus are difficult there when you have them in the sixth. And because the sixth house is enemies and conflicts, solving problems, paying attention to details. The sixth house is the opposite of the 12th, and the 12th is liberation. And the sixth is work. It's the sign of working. And, it corresponds to Virgo, which is a sign of work. Virgo is the harvest. In the Northern Hemisphere, it was the time of the harvest when everybody's out working in the fields. So what the sixth house is our negative karmas, but basically just our karmas we need to go through to burn them up, so we can go to the 12th to relax and rejuvenate and meditate, reach that higher state of consciousness. And the two are very linked. All opposite houses are always linked, just like opposite signs. And the sixth, when you have like benefic planets in the sixth, like Venus or the moon, it can be kind of difficult, because, well, when you have Venus in the sixth, your love affairs and your relationships work against you. Basically, you have partners who are like your enemy, or, there's problems, there's delays with those people. And you have a lot of difficult karmas to go through with these people. Whatever planets in the sixth, there's going to be some negative karma attached to that, and you've got to burn it. So, and the sixth is also a growing house. So when you get older, it gets easier and easier and easier, and you've burned that karma. And it also shows where you have a vulnerability. The eighth too. The eighth house is like a lot of vulnerabilities around that. But yeah, I've just been really interested in that lately. And then the sign of Aquarius, it's the man carrying water. It's a sign of Saturn, but it's also an air sign. And the man carrying water, well, he's not drinking the water and he's not in the water like Pisces. He's carrying it. And what that means is, so Aquarius has this reputation of being very humanitarian. We're supposedly moving into the Aquarius age. Some people say it's already started. Some people say, oh, it's another 500 years. But anyways, we're on the kind of brink. The man carrying water is carrying water to others because he has it in a jug, and he wants to give water to other people because he's not drinking it. So it means that it is very much a person who wants to help other people. a humanitarian sign, but it's Saturn. They're burning karma through helping others. Whereas Capricorn, the other sign of Saturn, is burning karma. Both of those signs are signs of burning karma, as is Virgo, the sixth sign. They're helping others through, Capricorn, it's through your profession and the work that you do and how your power and influence, because it's the 10th sign, a 10th earth sign. So through your work that you do in the world, you're burning the karma. But in Aquarius, it's more like networking with groups and putting your ideas out into groups and using the group to be a humanitarian influence. So now I'm coming to a much better understanding of the sign of Aquarius. And then I would say, as Vargas, to me, the most interesting Varga is the D24, what they call the Chaturvimshamsha or the Siddhamsha. It's basically a derivative of the 12th house. It's a 12th house Varga. And this Varga shows the what they call spiritual understanding. And you use this Varga as a map of the chakras. And in a Jaimini technique, you see the deity. You find your Atmakaraka in this chart and you look at the 12th from it. And that's the energy that is driving your spiritual life. That's the energy that will bring you up, that will push your evolution. But it's also a map of the chakras. So when you look at this D24 and you see planets in certain signs, that shows like the affliction or the benefits, depending on, the dignity of that chakra and what it rules, So, and like if you're doing some type of Kundalini yoga or Kriya yoga and you're trying to raise the energy, you'll stay more on a certain chakra that has an afflicted planet, so you can work that out. You'll see if it's D24 that the person will have challenges around, if they have an afflicted planet in this chart, they're going to have challenges around that, the chakra it's in and the issues of that chakra. Even though it might not seem like that in the outside world, that's what they're going to have internally. So it's an amazing chart to work with, really. Especially, if you're working with spiritual seekers and how they can use that deity's energy in the 12th from the Atmakaraka. So it's just wonderful. So I just wrote a bunch of, I wrote I'm writing a book now. I'm just almost finished, and it's about these Vargas, the D20, the D24, and the D16. And these are the spiritual Vargas because they are the Vargas of the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. Which are the moksha houses. And they become very important when, you're doing a lot of inner work. So that's my favorites. So right now, and I'm in that stage, I guess you could say.
I love that, Laura. And I'm so excited about this book that you're writing. I want to say, first of all, congratulations that you're nearly finished.
Thank you.
They're always enormous undertakings.
Yes.
So a moment of celebration here. We're right near the end. And I hope that you're going to come back on the podcast and talk to us about this book because it just sounds so profound. So I'm already looking forward to talking about that. Thanks for sharing with us about the D24. And I wanted to say to you, snap on Aquarius. You haven't heard, I have also done this interview for the podcast as well. And Aquarius was my sign of fascination, or the sign that I'm most attracted to. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I think that's because a friend of mine a few years ago, it was before COVID. So 2019 or something, or maybe beginning of 2020, she said to me, something that a teacher had said to her, which was, we are getting ready as a planet, or the world is getting ready for what is good for you is what is good for me. When we are on a planet where I know that what is good for my neighbor is actually what is good for me, that's when we can transform from this sort of place that we're in at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really touched by that, because so often we're driven by what's good for me is what's good for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or it's good for you and you're more powerful than me, so I do it, because you pay me or you make me, or I'm under duress in some way. So we do things for other people for all these things. But it seems to me that Aquarius really has this energy. It's like the egolessness of doing things for others because I know that is what is best.
Right.
Truly best for me, and that's why Aquarius, it's the pot, it's not the man carrying the pot in a way, it's the pot. It's all of this communal support and resources that we can give and create together that makes the world a better place. It's not about the guy carrying the pot,
Right.
It's about the pot. So, yep, I'm right
definitely
there with you with Aquarius, and aren't we having an interesting year for Aquarius this year as well? So, I think that's it's a nice time to be thinking about this sign. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Especially the two big guys. Jupiter's about to go back into Aquarius, but we had Saturn in Aquarius, and then the Lunar New Year, we had this pileup in Aquarius. So,
yeah, it's being very energized. So maybe it's not surprising that we're both feeling energized about Aquarius.
I know. Yep. I have my Mercury in Aquarius, so
I have nothing in there. I just think it's an amazing sign. Do you have a favorite type of astrology? Like, do you like doing prajna? Do you like doing natal charts? I've written also here mundane astrology, electional astrology, but I allow you to fill that in with whatever it is. So is there a favorite?
I would say, I'm really enjoying right now doing mundane astrology. I always love natal astrology, but lately I've been getting into looking or making prediction, world predictions, and I love it. I've really been getting into it, and all the different types of techniques you can use, from eclipses to Lunar New Year's to Sankrantis. There's lots of different ways you can use, and then you can use, some Western techniques where you get the actual map of the chart of the countries you want to look at, I've been diving more and more into mundane astrology, I would say. And I
think it's great. Have you got some videos on that, Laura, on your channel?
I have I did a video on the last eclipse, made some predictions about, this just really showed up. I actually didn't say this in the video, but it made so much sense when it happened. There was a building collapse in Miami. I don't know if you heard about it.
We did.
So eclipses happen in families, and they're in groups or in families, and they occur every 18 years. And 18 is a very significant number. It's a very spiritual number. But and this can also be connected to past life prediction, but that's a whole nother subject. I'm not going to get into that right now. But so an eclipse has a life, I think it's like 700 years, or between 700 and 800 years. And so every eclipse that happens belongs to a family. And so you have to not only look at the actual eclipse that happens, you have to look at the very first eclipse of that family. And you can find it on the NASA webpage. And basically, the very first eclipse of this eclipse that just happened, when this one that's kind of affecting us right now, and that building collapsed. Well, you had a conjunction of Mars and Venus in Cancer. Mars is buildings. Okay, he's debilitated in Cancer. Cancer is water. That they said this building collapsed because of the pool. Venus rules pools. It was right by the water. It was on the ocean. Cancer. It just really made a lot of sense. I was like, oh yeah, why did I should have said, there might be problems with buildings, because of water damage, or land. There'll be floods. There was this huge flood in Germany. that's ruined all those buildings, and a lot of people died. So it was basically debilitated Mars and Cancer. That just really made sense with that eclipse. So,
and we're still getting that at the moment, aren't we? Like today, in China, there's a flood in an underground railway metro or whatever, and people are up to their necks in water.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like
and
three things that you're referring to.
Right. Absolutely. And Venus is transportation. Venus is vehicles. So it's trains. Yeah. Makes so much sense. See, it's just really, I was kicking myself for missing that.
But I think that's the thing. And this is why, it's practice makes perfect, isn't it? Because you just do it over and over again. And the Saros cycle, this particular one, I remember looking it up as well. And it was saying that there'll be things that we already know. The facts are all there, but we just haven't put them together yet. And I think that Miami building collapse tragically seems to have been the case, where actually the research had been done to show
they knew
there was some destabilization, and I think that they were progressing with it. I don't think that it was someone had shoved it under the carpet or whatever. I think that they were, going to be addressing it. There was something that they thought they had time to deal with, and that this eclipse kind of brings together things that we knew. And the other two examples that you're talking about with the Germany and sorry, I brought in the third one, China, these are perhaps a little bit, we've been talking about global warming for a very long time. We knew that it was going to affect the weather and the way things are happening, but now people seem to be in the media or the mainstream, like in German politics or local government, seem to be going, this is global warming. This is exactly what we're expecting with global warming. And maybe a wake up, like data that we've had for a long time suddenly seems like, oh yeah, well, I get that. It all makes sense now.
Right. Exactly. And the thing, I just thought of this now, that the same thing happened in New York City. They had flooding in the subway, and people were kind of swimming through the subway. It was just, that just made, it made a lot of sense. So
the mundane is really interesting. I haven't messed around with it much, but I did one video where I had a look at that evergreen tanker ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal.
Oh, right.
And I was really surprised by how many indicators there were there, like around, like if you look up transportation, canals, you look up the date of the country when it started, there were just hit after hit of the same indicators, a bit like what you're saying. So mundane can be really fascinating. I'm so pleased with what you've shared, and I look forward to other insights that you have from that. That's wonderful.
It's a lot of fun playing around with mundane. It really is.
All right, and what has changed most in the time that you've been involved with astrology?
Oh gosh, I would just say just so many more people are interested in it. It's just exploded off of the charts. Back when I started, people were interested, but I lived in Los Angeles, and of course, everybody out there is interested, all of California, but when you went outside of that, it was nobody was, they were starting to, but now it's just off the charts. I know someone who's been doing research in the interest in astrology and the Google searches. And just in the last couple of years, it's gone so high. So I would say the interest in it, which I'm so thankful for. I'm so thankful that people are kind of waking up to this holy science, so, and even if it is Western, that's great too. It really has a lot to offer, but it's still just increasing exponentially in popularity. And I'm so thankful for that.
It's becoming mainstream.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And do you attribute that to anything? Going back to mundane astrology that we were just talking about, is there anything that you think is the context of that?
Well, I really haven't thought about that, or looked at it in an astrological perspective. And that's a good question, because I might do that, because it has been really in the last couple of years, or even 3 or 4 years, but I haven't looked at it astrologically. So,
yeah, we'll have to get back together and
speculate on that. Yeah.
Okay. And question 11, what is on the horizon for you with astrology? What are you looking forward to?
I've just finished this book and I have 4 other books I want to do. That's basically what I'm concentrating on right now, are the books. And I have some other projects, but I can't really talk about those because I'm working with other people. But
we'll keep our eyes open and keep listening to the podcast. We'll have you back.
Right. Great. Thank you.
All right. And what about, what is it that people can expect when they work with you? Laura, tell us a little bit about how you work, your style. What can people expect?
When I do readings now, I record them, video record them. I don't do in-person readings anymore. And I like it better that way. I'm really highly sensitive and empathic, I guess you could tell. So I was very overly sensitive to people's reactions, when I would give predictions. So when I do it this way, it's so much better for me because I can just let things flow. I can really, say what's coming through. What I wrote down here, on your questions, I said, I don't hold back. That's basically what people can expect when, all of this information's coming through, all of these things I want to tell the person, and I can just do it freely without the interference of their disappointments or their, excitement or whatever it is. So I like to tell people that, I usually do, or I think it's on my website that if you don't want me to tell you something, or if you don't want me to predict something, please tell me, because I'm just going to let everything come through, whether positive or negative. So that's what people can expect. And, most of my, I've never really had a problem with that at all, but, people saying, oh, don't give me bad news. I think I've had one person in my whole career say that. It's just really nice to be able to do that. And, the whole time that I'm talking, when I do the recordings, I talk straight. It's just, there's never a time where I'm kind of quiet, or I just really give a lot of information. And it goes back to what I was talking about before about like the oracles, in Greece, they had the oracle at Delphi. They would go and ask her the question, and she would allow the God to speak through her, and they wouldn't interrupt. They wouldn't ask questions. They would just listen. And this is something that kind of getting back to that, I really like that.
I really get that too, because I really found when I first started looking at charts that I think I burst into crying, just about every chart I saw. It's quite, there is an exchange because of what we spoke about earlier with cooking the meal. You put someone's flavor there into your mouth, you're going to have a reaction to it.
Absolutely. Oh God.
And so I think there is a skill as an astrologer, isn't there, to be in tune with the chart, to be loyal and faithful to the truth that's in the chart, to be oneself, and to have compassion for the person that one is speaking to. Like those are kind of 3 places to be.
Yes.
There's 3 different places. There's like who I am, how the chart is, how the other person is, and navigating those 3 places of truth is one of the things that I think as an astrology, one needs to solve that or navigate that dynamic. And this is a great way that you found to do it, which is just to really honor the ability that you have to tell the truth about the chart. And the best way to do that at this stage is in one go onto the video, record it all in the flow.
Exactly. Yes, that's so true. And it's basically, when you're doing someone's chart, when you're analyzing it and, giving predictions or, telling them what you see, you're basically touching them psychically. It's so funny too. I can feel when people are looking at my chart. Yeah. It's an imprint of yourself And when people are trying to understand it, they're analyzing it. They're entering into your aura, I guess you could say, or they're touching you cyclically, and that's very profound. That's a sacred thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is really important. One wants to have the lightest of touch in other people's life. In a way, one doesn't want to cause damage, but at the same time, one has been asked to tell the truth of the chart. So yeah, it's an interesting path to navigate.
It is. Definitely.
We have come to the end of my 12 questions, but is there anything that you wanted to add at the end of all of that conversation that perhaps things I didn't touch on, Laura? Anything you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I really don't, I can't think of anything else. No, that was just a lot. That was great. That was a wonderful interview. I love these questions.
That's great.
Yeah,
all right.
They're awesome.
Good. Well, thank you for taking the time to answer all these questions. And before you go, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about how people can work with you? So tell us about your website, how clients can get in touch with you, but also tell us about your products, because you do have courses and you have a book. So tell us just a little bit about how people, having heard this interview, how they can find out more.
My website is laurabaratastrologer.com. And I have astrology readings. I have cards of truth readings. All of my readings are recorded. I do have, right now I have two courses, Varshafal and Jaimini courses. And I have a book available, which that's going to change soon. My new book should be coming out soon, like a month.
That is so close, Laura. Amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I do tutoring as well. So, but you would just have to contact me directly, and that all of that information is on my website. So
wonderful. Yeah. And I will include all of that in the show notes and the transcript, so people can just click on through. Laura, thank you so much for your time today, for being so open, sharing your experience and wisdom. I have thoroughly enjoyed the Vedic Astrology Podcast, Sits Down with Laura Barat. And I've already invited you on this interview about 3 times to come back to the show. So I hope that you will be back on the show soon with another interesting insight into Vedic astrology.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. And I look forward to being with you the next time we have an episode of the Vedic Astrology Podcast. Until then, stay well.